Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to How to Get Hired. I am Bill, the company's expert, and today we are going to talk about job search, how to get a job. The title of this episode is What Not to Say in a Job Interview, so we're going to be talking about that. And also, we're going to give the best answer to the job interview question, why did you leave your last job? So stick around for those. If you are between jobs right now, you're trying to find a job, or you are currently employed and you're wanting to change careers, or you're wanting to find a better position somewhere, you've come to the right place. This is a weekly live stream where I cover those topics and more. Special thanks to my YouTube channel members, my Patreons, my super thanks donors, and to my participants. You guys are awesome. And this is an interactive live stream. That means you get to ask me questions. So if you see this and you're watching it on a device or on a computer, you should see a chat box somewhere in the vicinity of my face. Get in the chat. Let me know what you're wondering about, what you're struggling with. I'm going to start off by answering the two questions or the two topics of today's episode, but then I'll be taking questions. So get in the chat and let me know what's up, and we will go from there. You may have heard the rumors, and that is that I am only reachable by fax, but I assure you they are false. Maybe I should do that. That should be one way of, eliminating a lot of time spent on communications. Just insist upon only being reached by carrier pigeon or something, and I'm sure the volume of communications you got to deal with will go down. Okay, let's get into this. The first thing we're going to talk about, we're going to cover these topics in reverse order. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the best answer to the job interview question. Why did you leave your last job? And you'll have to excuse me today. I'm still slightly under the weather. Got some kind of weird flu throat thing. So my voice has that kind of gravelly James Bond quality that I know everybody loves. And that's why you're here. Okay, so this is a job interview question. This is a dreaded job interview question because it's one of those job interview questions where it's a trap. They are trying to find dirt on you. They're trying to find reasons that would disqualify you or count against you. And this is a question they ask to do that. Okay, there's several of these types of interview questions where it's essentially a trap. Like the salary question is when it's asked early on in the process. That's a trap. They ask, tell me about your worst boss, that kind of thing. That's a trap, right? If you throw somebody under the bus, it doesn't say a lot of good things about you. So they're just trying to see if you're going to do that, right? So this is another question like that. They say, why did you leave your last job? And as you probably can imagine, if you start answering this question by saying, oh yeah, my last employer, they were a real jackass. I had a major beef with them. I didn't get along with them. And you start throwing them under the bus. Obviously, that's probably going to be a bad answer, right? And you are correct. So let's get into it. Okay, so the reason they ask this question is because recruiters care about two things. Okay, if you're being asked this job interview question by a recruiter, you could be asked also by a hiring manager. Hopefully you know the difference between the two of those, okay? Hiring manager, if you're wondering what's a hiring manager, if you were to get hired for the job, they select you, and then you become an employee. The hiring manager, the person who's the hiring manager, they would become your boss, okay? That's who a hiring manager is. Whereas a recruiter is somebody different. Recruiter is someone that is either hired if they're an external person, or they're brought in from the HR department just to help with the selection of an employee. And then they bugger off and you never see them ever again. So even if you get hired, you'll probably never interact with a recruiter again unless you're being hired into the HR department. Okay, you will never see the recruiter again. Okay, so they're not an expert on the job itself. They're just a person whose job it is to go out and find candidates. Okay, so if you get asked this question by a recruiter, they're asking this because they're looking to see if you have any risk factors, right? For example, if you are someone who has a history of not getting along with people and you cause a lot of issues, you would be a risky choice if they were to hire you. You would be a high-risk candidate, right? So recruiters are actively looking for things that are known to determine who's a high-risk candidate. And that's why they're asking this question. The whole purpose is to see if you have a history of issues working as an employee, like you keep getting fired or something. And they're also asking it to see if you're going to badmouth anybody. You're going to throw your last employer under the bus or something. Okay, both of those would reveal negative things about you. Okay, so that's why they're asking. So that's the whole point of the question. Now, before we get into the answer, let me tell you that this information is none of their business. Okay, what you did with a third party, not these people, but somebody else, is technically none of their business. You see, they could sit you down and ask you for your credit card number, right? Now, I think everyone would agree that that's clearly none of their business. They're not entitled to that information, right? So what I'm here to say is that even though they're asking this question, they want to know about what you did with someone else. They can ask, but they are not entitled to know that information. Okay, so you can choose to disclose it if you wish, but remember, if you don't wish to disclose it, this is not a deposition. You don't have to. Okay, so that's the reality of what's going on. It's none of their business. You don't want to express any negative thoughts. You don't want to throw people under the bus. You don't want to tell them how you hated this and you didn't work out there and you had issues working for these people. All that stuff is going to count against you. Why does it count against you? It counts. You love my voice. It counts against you because recruiters are taught a principle that they apply to pretty much almost everything that they will ask you in a job interview. And the principle is past behavior predicts future behavior. So any question they ask you about what you did in the past, what did you do in a previous job, right? That kind of thing. When you think about it, like what you did in some other situation has no direct bearing on what you're going to do here, right? And as you know, we all live and learn. People tend to make mistakes when they're younger, and then they learn, and when they gain more experience, they get it right. Okay? So the danger is when they ask you about something in your past, and you say, oh yeah, this is what I did, right? And this is how it happened. They're going to infer that, okay, so if we were to hire you, and we were to put you in this job now, if we put you in a situation like that again, you would handle it this way. And this would be the outcome, right? So whatever you say to this, you have to make sure that, okay, you might have done that in the past, but you also have to make sure that it's something that you would do again, right? It's not like you handled it poorly in the past, but you have since learned not to do that, right? Okay. So anyway, I'm doing a very long preamble to this, but the bottom line is that this question is a trap. It's a bad question. It's meant to get the dirt on you. So you don't want to spend a lot of time on this question. You want to give them a very quick answer and move on to other better questions where you can explain why you're awesome and why you're the perfect employee, okay? This question is not an opportunity to explain how you're the most amazing employee ever because they're asking you about something that you did with another company, okay? And if you are leaving or you have left, chances are it's not going to be a very compelling reason why they should hire you when you talk about this, okay? So you want to keep your answer to maybe 30 to 45 seconds max. Get off this question soon, okay? We already talked about, never say bad things about a previous employer. So if you're talking about a previous employer, don't say it didn't work out. Don't say there was a problem. Don't say, they took action against me, they fired me, nothing like that, okay? Even if it's true, you don't want to say this stuff because it will count against you. Okay, so you've got to use some language here, some nice PC language. You could say something has been a challenge, right? or there was a difference of opinion, right? It's maybe okay to kind of say stuff like that, okay? But if you're going to say anything about it, you want to make sure it's a success story, okay? So they say, why did you leave your last job? And you say, well, my last job, I had done this work for them. I had solved all these problems. I had accomplished these goals. We had a great relationship, right? You want to say good things. Okay, now let's get into the particular situations that may have led you here. Okay, so the first one is if you were laid off. Let's say you were laid off from your last job. Okay, if you were laid off, there's no problem in itself in saying that you were laid off. Okay, especially if you were laid off with other people. So there was like a bunch of you that were laid off together. Okay, if that's the case, you want to mention that it wasn't just you that was laid off. You were part of a group of people that were laid off altogether, right? And the implication is that there was nothing wrong with you or your performance. It's that the company was maybe downsizing, or there was shifts in the business, something like this. So it had nothing to do with your personal performance. That's not what led to this. Okay, it happens in business. Companies lay off their employees. Excuse me. And you're not saying or signaling anything that would make them think poorly of you. Okay. So it's okay to say you were laid off. Okay. If you can say this without being an outright lie, that would be a good answer. Okay. So I would say I was laid off. Okay. If you were. Now, the second situation is if you left. So you weren't laid off. You voluntarily decided to leave. Just you. Okay. Not part of a group, but just you individually. You decided, you know what? I'm going to leave. Okay. So that's the second situation. Now, if you left, once again, it is not necessarily a problem in itself to admit that you left. Okay. People leave for legitimate reasons. And that's fine. It doesn't necessarily signal that there was anything wrong with you as an employee. Excuse me for 1 second. As I cough my guts out here. Okay. And if you have to give a reason for this, keeping in mind that no employer is entitled to this information. They can ask and you can disclose if you choose to, but they are not entitled to it. Okay, if they want to know the reason. And usually you would want to provide certainly a brief general reason why you decided to leave. Okay. What I'd recommend is if unless this is like, as long as this isn't a complete outright lie, okay, a good answer is to say where there were no opportunities for growth. Or an even better way of putting it is, I was ready to do more. Okay. Now keep in mind, you should not try and say negative things. You should try and say positive things. So if they say, why did you leave your last job? And the reality was that you left. You could say, well, I'd been there for 3 years. In that time, I had done everything they asked me, and I actually enjoyed the job, and I was performing really well. We accomplished all these goals, and this kind of thing. And there was a lot going for it. However, I felt that like after 3 years, I was ready to move forward. I was ready to do more than what that job involved. And unfortunately, at that employer, there were really no opportunities to move up or to move sideways or to do anything else. And I just didn't feel like resigning myself to doing that for the rest of my life. I felt I was ready to do more. Something like that. I think that's a good answer. Okay. You're not throwing anyone under the bus. It's very benign. You're avoiding them getting any kind of dirt on you. Okay. So if you can say that, if you were laid off, or if you did leave, certainly say that. Okay. And then the final situation of 3 is that you were fired. Okay. Maybe you were fired from your previous job. This is where it gets tricky. Because the problem is if you say, I was fired, maybe there was a performance issue, maybe there was a personality clash or something, they didn't appreciate your attitude or your comments, or, whatever. Or you thought they were a bunch of jerks, right? Whatever the reason, you were fired. Now, the problem with admitting this, okay, is that once again, recruiters, when they go back to recruiter school, okay, and it's business school. I have taught in universities and business school. I have taught recruiters. The problem is they're taught this concept that I mentioned earlier. Past behavior predicts future behavior. And the problem here is that if you're saying, well, I'm the type of person that gets fired, what they're hearing is like, okay, so you were fired in the past without really knowing anything about you. That leads me to suspect that if we were to hire you here, you would have a higher likelihood of being fired in this job because you have a history of that kind of thing, right? This is the problem, okay? So the conventional answer that a lot of recruiters will give you, okay, and we're going to get to this in a moment, is that you should say, I was fired. You talk about, maybe what went wrong, and then you say, I learned my lesson. I learned not to do that, and now I'm older and wiser, and that won't happen again. Basically, that's the answer that a lot of recruiters will recommend you say. I strongly disagree. Okay, for reasons we're going to talk about in a moment. The problem is that, like I said, you're walking into a trap here if you disclose that. If you admit that you were fired, signaling that I'm the type of employee that gets fired, they're going to paint you with that brush. They're going to assume that, oh, it didn't work out with one person employing you, so if we employ you, it probably is not going to work out also, right? So this is this kind of judgment that they make, right? Based on what little they know about you. So here's what I recommend, okay? If you were fired from a previous job, I would not disclose this, okay? Now, remember, keeping in mind that they are not entitled to this information. They can ask, just like they can ask you for your credit card number and bank account number, and it's entirely up to you if you want to disclose this to them, okay? But they are not entitled to it. You are not required to give them full and complete information to questions like this because it is none of their business, okay? Now, you got to say something. So this is what I would say without outright lying. This is what I would say, okay? I would talk about, first of all, the approach is to talk about what led to the firing, some of the issues that you might have had with the company, okay? And then I would sum it up by once again saying I was ready to do more, because that is true, right? So that way you give them an answer. The answer isn't an outright lie, but you avoid the trap they're trying to set for you, which is disclosing this negative stuff that will ultimately hurt your chances of them selecting you, okay? So say the problem that led to your firing. Let's say that a great answer, if you could say it, if it isn't an outright lie, is this, okay? You say that, well, when I got that job, it involved certain duties and certain responsibilities, and I started off doing that. But over time, the job evolved, and it turned into something that had completely different duties and completely different responsibilities. And unfortunately, I didn't have the talent or the interest to do that version of the job. But what it did do is it reinforced my passion and my desire and my ability to do the original job. And so that's what brings me here, because this job is similar to the original job. And I know that I'm good at that, and I know that I'm passionate about doing that. That's what I want to do, and that's why I'm here. Something like that. That would be a good, concise answer. So if you can say something like that without it being a complete outright lie, I would phrase it like that. Don't make any mention of, I was fired, I was let go, okay, because all that will count against you. And there you go. That's pretty much how I would handle this question if I was asked in a job interview. This is what I recommend you do. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's go briefly to questions. I see there's some people in the chat. That's awesome. Welcome, welcome. Mike Goritz says, hi from the States. Application engineer by trade. My microphone is drifting further away from me here. Let's adjust this here. I got this big fat microphone right in my face. Okay, it won't stay where I put it, but that's okay. Okay, application engineer by trade, worked for a leader in privileged account management. I don't know what that is, but that's maybe like, the executive accounts or something. That is key in identity management. Okay. I have a lot of deep product knowledge and certifications. Terminated for asking personal questions. They were related to history. I learned history is aligned with politics and religion. No issues with performance. Terminated in May and had 15 interviews. No offers. Turning 54. Could it be ageism? I generally, listen, we're human and we all have a temptation that when things don't go our way, we just jump to, oh, it must be some kind of favoritism. It's some kind of bias against me. Now, sometimes that's true, okay, but sometimes it isn't. And I see a lot of people jumping to that conclusion when that's not really what's going on. I don't know about your specific situation, Mike. It could be, I suppose, but I tend to think it isn't. You see, ageism is, it's a slippery topic. There's the sort of politically correct narrative that people talk about, where we talk about ageism as a bias towards younger people. But hopefully, as everybody can appreciate, there's also ageism that goes in the other direction. There's a bias. Like, for example, how many 21-year-old CEOs do you see being hired by Fortune 500 companies? Not a lot, right? They're usually older people, right? How many 72-year-old waitresses do you see being hired? Not a lot, right? So it depends on the context and the industry. Sometimes you get ageism, but sometimes you don't. It's actually not ageism. It's that people of a certain age tend to have a certain characteristic, or they have a certain behavior. For example, older people tend to be less familiar with the latest technology, right? Now, if a candidate needs to be familiar with the latest technology, and you find that younger candidates are being mainly hired, is that ageism? I'll leave that up to you. I would say no, because it's not about their age. It's about how familiar they are with technology. The fact that that's correlated with age is irrelevant, really, because they're not looking at age. They're looking at how familiar you are with technology. So if you're older and you're passionate about technology, there's absolutely nothing standing in the way of you being hired, despite the fact that you're older. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of jobs are biased towards hiring older people, especially higher level jobs. They want someone with experience. They want someone that has been around the farm a few times and they understand the professional code of conduct, right? Now, Mike, once again, without really understanding your particular situation in depth, just only what you've said here, it seems like you're learning about the culture of that employer the hard way. You're learning that they don't like people asking certain questions. And if you ask certain questions, that signals that perhaps you might have an issue with certain things. And at least what I'm inferring from this is that they might assume that you think certain things, you hold certain opinions by virtue of the fact you're asking certain questions, right? And they don't like that. It signals to them that you're not on board with their culture, with how they like to do things and how they think. Okay, so it looks now. Listen, these people could be out to lunch, and they could be evil for all you know. You know what I mean? The fact that you didn't fit in is not necessarily a bad thing. The fact that it came to an end is disappointing if it was a nicely high-paid job. But you know what I mean? If they were engaged in unethical behavior, the fact that you didn't fit in there, is that like what does that say about your character? That says you're a pretty forthright, person. So, but the fact that like now you've learned this lesson, you're older, you're wiser, right? You're 54. Nothing wrong with being 54, you youngster. You know what I'm saying? It's fine. Okay, so I suppose it could be ageism, but that wouldn't be the first thing I would jump to in assessing it. And in any case, it doesn't matter, because what these people did or did not do doesn't matter. You can go on and get hired by a different group of people that obviously don't think like these people did. I'm not sure if that helps, but that's what I think of it. Listen, stuff like this happens all the time, and it's okay. We move on, right? It sucks at the time, and it's a bit turbulent sometimes to do a transition, but once you're happily employed in another situation, this won't be the big stressful thing that it might be for you right now. You'll be fine. Okay. And, you know what I mean? Like if someone were to hire you in this type of role again, you obviously, maybe you're even wiser than you were doing it for this existing bunch of people. So you could certainly do the job. Once again, I don't know if that helps. That's just my reaction to it. Auntie K, is that how you say? Hi, Bill. Hope you're having a great day. I am having a great day so far. My voice is messed up, but apart from that, I'm doing fine. In my country, all job contracts have a contractual resignation period, usually 2 to 4 weeks. Often in job interviews, they ask, how soon would you be able to start? How would you? I see. The offer is only valid for 2 to 4 weeks. Is that what you're saying? Are there any hidden aspects of this question? How soon able to start that we should know? No, I don't think so. You see, in different countries, there are different laws about notice, how much notice you need to give. And usually what you find is that there's like a scale, right? So if you work, for example, I'm in Canada where the Canadian labor laws say that if you work at a place for less than a month, you don't have to give any notice. You could tell them that day. It's like, I'm sorry, I quit, and then that's it. You don't have to give any notice. If you work at a place for like 2 years or less, you have to give 1 week's notice. If you work at a place between 2 and 10 years or something, you have to give 2 weeks notice. If you work at a place for, like, it's a scale. So if you work at a place for 35 years and you quit, you have to give something like 6 weeks notice. That's the Canadian labor laws, generally. Now in the States, it's similar, I believe. I think it varies by state. I'm not sure. I'm not in the States. In the EU, they have something similar, but it's not the same. So depending on where you are in the world, they have these laws that say you have to give this much notice. So it may not be possible to start a job tomorrow, right? If legally, you're working right now and you have to give notice. You have to say, I am going to leave and I have to give you 3 weeks notice of this minimum, right? You know what I mean? Because the employers have rights too. And one of their rights is that, people can't just up and leave one day out of the blue, like without there being any consequences, right? You can do that, but there are consequences for doing that. You are docked pay and all this kind of stuff. So it would be strange to me how a company would, say like, how soon can you start? And then get upset if you can't start like in 2 days or something. They want you to start tomorrow. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But beyond the law, then they can ask for whatever they want. They say, well, if you say like, well, I can start in 3 weeks, they say, no, we need someone who can start in 2 weeks. Legally, you got to give 2 weeks notice, usually. So we're looking for someone who can start in 2 weeks. They have the right to do that. Okay. If they find a good employee, this shouldn't be a problem. The only types of organizations that would do this is if you're going for like an entry-level job, a low-level job, where, like, this sounds insensitive, but, where candidates are a dime a dozen. If you don't want the job, they've got plenty of other qualified people they could just turn around and hire instead. If it's a job like that, then maybe they could put this stuff on there and get away with it, and it would be reasonable. But you're asking, if they say, how soon would you be able to start? Personally, I would say, well, 2 weeks would be ideal for me. Something like that. If you have concerns in that area, I would say like 2 weeks would be ideal. But I would turn it around and ask them a question. Say, is that okay with you, or would you, is that acceptable, or is that going to be an issue? Something like that. And then if they say, well, we were hoping for like 1 week or something, you say, okay. And then it's up to you. You could say, well, okay, 1 week might be difficult for me, but I'm sure I could swing it. I'm sure I could make that happen if absolutely necessary. Something like that, right? So you leave the door open. Okay, that's how I would handle it. I've never encountered issues like that being on either side of the table. Like, I remember I got a job once where I signed the offer letter and then said, listen, I'm not going to haggle with you over compensation, but I have a vacation planned and I'd like to take my vacation and then start after my vacation is done, which will be in 2 months. And they basically said, well, that's a little disappointing for us, but I suppose we could do it. And I said, okay, great. And in return, everything else is fine. I'm not going to haggle with you on anything. This is great as is. Just give me the start date. And, that's the only time that's ever been an issue that I've ever witnessed. So I'm not sure if that's helpful, but that's my response to that. Michael A is saying something there. Okay, great. Let's move on to the main topic of this live stream, which is answering the question, what not to say in a job interview. So if you are about to do job interviews, or you're doing job interviews, and you're wondering what are sort of instant kiss of death things that you can say that, you want to avoid these, right? Let's get into what those might be. Okay. I've done some videos on this. I did a video a couple of years ago. I can't remember what it's called, like, never say this or something, where it's just like a quick fire set of clips of, like, me saying all the things that you shouldn't say, or all the things that have major red flags associated with them, or could be associated with them. So if you ever get a chance to see that video, maybe look it up if you're interested. But let's go through some of these. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a couple of things that, are obvious red flags that you shouldn't say. And then I'm going to try something a little bit different. We're going to get ChatGPT involved, and I'm going to sort of critique ChatGPT's answers because it's not perfect. It does make some mistakes. So these are a couple of things I would say off the bat. Don't disclose that you have another job offer. That's what I would say. Okay. Because you see, it's a double-edged sword. Some people say that you should, some people say that you shouldn't. I think the reasoning of why you should say it, some people argue you should say it, is because it gives them it gives these recruiters a sense of urgency that they should act quickly to get you before you're snapped up by somebody else. That's a very risky strategy. Okay. If they're interviewing 6 people and all of the 6 could do the job, and there's no obvious red flags with any of the 6, which one would you extend the offer to? The one that's already in negotiations with 2 other employers about, because they've received 2 other job offers? Is that the one you would try and get? Probably not, right? You'd probably approach the candidate that doesn't already have an existing job offer from somewhere else. Okay. There's less urgency. There's less competition. They're more likely to accept your offer, And you avoid the situation of, we offered this person the job, but then they took a different job, and that's embarrassing for the recruiter that set that up. Right? They have to go back to their boss and say, well, we did make the offer like you agreed, but I'm sorry, it seems like they've already been snapped up by somebody else, so we missed the bus on that one. It's embarrassing. And then you got to redo all that work with somebody else. Okay, so don't disclose you've got another job. It's great that you do. That's wonderful. Keep it to yourself. Okay? Obviously, never say negative things in a job interview. Don't say negative things about previous bosses, previous coworkers, previous employers, just people in general. Like, you talk about a different company in the news or something, and you say, they're a bunch of idiots. Like, don't say negative things. Don't say negative things about yourself. They say, tell me about a time you did this, and you tell a story where you messed up and you did a bad job and you admitted defeat, and don't say anything negative about yourself or anyone else in a job interview. It is the kiss of death. It will count against you. Okay? If they ask you, a certain question or, anything, don't go to the job interview and say, I don't know what you guys do. Do 2 minutes of research, find out what the company does. Okay? Equally, don't go down to a job interview not knowing what the role is. They're looking for someone who's got all your qualifications. Great, but it's for a role. You don't understand what that role is or what someone does in that role. Do some research for 2 minutes to find out what it is. Don't go down to a job interview and say, I don't have any questions for you. They say, do you have any questions? And you say, nope. Don't do that. That signals that you either don't care about this job. It's just, or, you just don't know enough to ask anything intelligent, right? You haven't done any preparation. So whichever way you slice it, don't answer no to do you have any questions for us? Okay. Disclosing a side hustle. Let's say you've got your own thing going on the side. Okay. You have a little, home business or something you do casually, right? Don't disclose that in a job interview. I think it's fantastic that you have this, and it is fantastic. And you are obviously a highly capable, diligent person with a head for business. That's awesome. Those are some great traits. They make you very valuable. But don't disclose that in a job interview, because even though you might be proud of this accomplishment, and you should be, even though you want to show off your abilities, which is understandable, the problem is that when you disclose this, what employers hear, whether it's a recruiter or a hiring manager or anyone else, what they hear is that your loyalties are conflicted. Okay? You either go, if they offer you the job and you end up working for these people, now you're serving two masters. Okay? They want you to work overtime, and you're thinking, should I work overtime? I don't know. If I work overtime, I won't be able to do my home business, right? So you go, no, I'm sorry, because you want to do your home business like you normally do, right? So you're serving two masters. They don't like that. It also means that they have less power over you, because if they were your sole source of income, and all your energy outside of R&R goes to them, they have more control. They can threaten you with firing or layoff or whatever, and it carries more weight. If you've got your own thing going on the side and you're financially secure, they don't have as much power over you. So, okay, so you might not try as hard at work. You might not care as much if they don't really think you're that great of an employee. So for a variety of reasons, don't disclose you've got another thing going on the side. Okay? That's what I'd say to that. Now, I am going to do something that I've never done, because I think it's a bit of a lark here, if I can do this, and that is a scientific term. I am going to pull up ChatGPT, and I'm going to do this in another weird browser that I never use called Edge. Here we go. And I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to do this together. Let's see here. And then after this, we will get to questions. Okay, so let's see here. So what are we talking about? What not to say in a job interview, right? Let's see what ChatGPT says about this. For those of you who are not familiar with ChatGPT or not using it on a regular basis, start using it, okay? Because this thing is the sort of hidden magic weapon that will help you in your job search, okay? It'll make you work so much faster, but also it will actually allow you to write better resumes and cover letters and prepare for interviews and all this. It'll allow you to be more effective than you could have been if you weren't using tools like ChatGPT. Okay, let's see what ChatGPT says about this. Okay, so it's listing things that you don't want to say. Let's take a look at this. Negative comments about previous employers. Absolutely. Okay, so don't say my last boss was awful or anything like that. Yes, for that reason. It says something very bad about your character. It's almost the instant kiss of death if you do this in a job interview. So absolutely. Number 2, overly personal information. I'm dealing with a lot of drama at home. Well, once again, that's kind of a negative thing. So saying that would be negative, but not for the reason that they're talking about. It would be a problem because of this, right? But the thing is, it's just not a good idea. This wouldn't be an instant kiss of death, but it's just not a good idea. Don't give them all the details of your home life and your family and your food dislikes and your extended family and your hobbies, especially if you got some weird hobbies. It's cool to have some weird hobbies, I think. I think some of the most interesting people I know have really effing weird hobbies, but that's great. But the problem is if you tell that to strangers who don't know you, they just think you're a weirdo and there's some negative stuff going on there. So, okay, and obviously some stuff is confidential. Like, they want to know your bank account number. Obviously that's confidential. Don't say, I don't know. Yeah, I would agree. That just signals poor preparation. Okay. I don't know the answer to that. You should always have an answer. Okay. And if you're wondering, a good default answer to any question they ask you that stumps you is to go back to the requirements that they listed in the job posting. Okay? So go back to the original job posting where they said, we're looking for someone who's got this, and this. Okay? This education, this experience, these skills. Go back to that and start talking about how you have those, or one of those at least. Okay? They ask you some weird question. You don't know how to answer it. You say, but you would say something like, well, the fact that I have this would probably guide me through that or something, right? So that's always your default sort of answer. Okay? I don't like this. I know several people recommend this, where you say, I don't know, but I can find out and get back to you. No. You want to be better prepared for that. You want to give them an answer. Okay? So you do this by preparing and having sort of contingency answers waiting. So anything they ask you, you don't know, you state a couple of things that you can always fall back on, like your main things that you have that add value, like your experience or your education. Okay, asking about salary or benefits too early. Yes, I would agree with that. Like the first thing you say is like, so how much does this pay? What does that signal? It signals that you're only in it for the money. You don't care about the actual job. And that also is the kiss of death. Recruiters are trained to look for someone who is a fit for a job, meaning that they are passionate about it. They are talented in it, in that job specifically. Okay. And that's who they want to hire, ideally. So if you say something like this, right, that signals that you're not a fit and that you're only here because you care about the money, you don't care about the actual job. That's what's important to you. That's what you're signaling. Okay, while these topics are important, they should be addressed later. Yes, absolutely. I agree with that one. Okay, lying or exaggerating. Well, listen, exaggerating is a very charged word here. Now, look at advertising, look at promotion. Has anyone ever exaggerated anything in an ad you've seen? Of course they have. That's what salespeople do. They focus on the benefits and the good aspects, and they downplay the negative aspects or the disadvantages, right? Everyone has got strengths and weaknesses. You have strengths and weaknesses. I have strengths and weaknesses. We all do. What you're going to do in a job interview is you're going to try and downplay your weaknesses, and you're going to make sure that they understand your strengths. Okay? So exaggerating is kind of a charged word. I think that a lot of people will exaggerate, and you can expect people to exaggerate. Everyone's going to be exaggerating. Okay? So I don't know about this, okay, this word here, but this for sure, like saying, if the answer is an outright yes, if you were asked that directly and you say no, yeah, that's going to be a problem. And why is this a problem? It's not just a problem because like, oh, I have a hang up about it. It's a problem because if they ever found out that that's what you're doing, it's certainly a sudden death elimination. Also, you could be blacklisted from that company, and sometimes companies share that with other companies or other organizations. You never know what they got going on, so it's a bad idea. Okay. Lies are often uncovered. No, they're not. Sometimes they're uncovered. But do you want to take the risk? It's just a bad idea. So don't lie. Don't lie outright. It's on my resume. When asked about your experience, excuse me. When asked about your experience responding with, it's all on my resume. Yeah, that's okay. That's kind of arrogant. Okay. It comes across as dismissive or lazy. Yeah, listen. Okay, here is a reality for everyone who doesn't already know this. A lot of recruiters are incompetent. And their method of assessing someone's suitability for a role is deeply flawed. It's not necessarily because the recruiters are bad people. It's just that this method of my brain is letting me down. This method of assessing a candidate's suitability for a job has been shown, not by me, but by experts, people who study this stuff, do research on it with data. They've known for a long time. This is not a very accurate or effective method for finding the best candidate or the least risky candidate. We can see this every day by the fact that, a lot of recruiters and a lot of hiring managers hire people that then turn out to be complete duds. It doesn't work out, right? The turnover rate for employees is higher than it's ever been in the past. It's highest right now. People are staying for shorter and shorter amounts of time, right? This is well known. Okay. So it's just a bad idea. Okay. Now, if you go to a job interview and they don't know the first thing about you, you sent in your resume, you sent in a cover letter, and the first thing on your resume and the first thing on your cover letter was that you have this. And you go down to an interview and they don't know the first thing about you. They don't even know that you have that. Right? What's your reaction going to be? It's going to be anger, probably. Frustration. It's like, what? Well, why did you invite? I mean, if you don't even know that about me, why did you invite me for the interview is the obvious question, right? You've got to resist the temptation to express that, unfortunately, okay? Because even though you're right, you're going to come across as a jackass. You're going to come across as an angry type person who's got a problem with them. And if you think that's the type of person they're going to pick, you're in for a surprise. So yeah, even though this might be justified, don't say it. Don't indicate it with body language either. You know, you just kind of come across as annoyed by that, right? That's the kiss of death, okay? Lack of enthusiasm, okay? I'm just looking for any job right now. Yeah, don't say that for reasons I covered earlier. Criticizing the job or company. I've heard the work environment here isn't great. Yeah, some people have brought this up in the context of when they ask you, what questions do you have for them? Right? They'll say like, do you have any questions for us? And then you have to ask the recruiter a question. Some people, and even in these live streams that I do, people in the comments have suggested, like, to ask them a question that kind of grills them a bit, It's like, what's the worst aspect for you of working here, or something like that. Don't do that. That creates awkwardness. They're not going to say, oh yeah, this place is really not all it's cracked up to be. If I could be perfectly honest with you, run, don't take this job. They're not going to say that stuff. So they'll have to put on some kind of weird game face and say the party line, right? But they're not going to enjoy it. And they're going to remember you as the person that, sort of put the screws to them in the interview and made them feel awkward. So don't say stuff like this, okay? Even if it's true. Even if the company has got some really well-known bad points to it. Okay? Overemphasizing weakness. I would say mentioning weakness. Okay? I know that a lot of recruiters like to believe that, the candidate should be honest and you should get a nice overview of their weaknesses. It's like, no, your job is to not say any weaknesses of you. It's not to disclose anything negative about you in a job interview. I'll just say that, like, what a lot of people don't realize is that your relationship to the recruiter or to the hiring manager is very complex. In some senses, you are partners. You are on the same side, right? If you are a suitable candidate, then you would want to work with them to get you hired, right? And then both parties benefit from that. You're the best employee, you take the job, you end up working out great. The company benefits, you benefit. So they're your partner, okay? You also want to give them what they need and what they're looking for to say yes to you, okay? You're on the same side. However, in another sense, they are your adversary, okay? For example, like we talked about today, they're trying to get the dirt on you. That's what a lot of job interview questions are tailored to, especially things like the salary question, right? Or why did you leave your last job? They're trying to see if there's any, shady thing in your past that would suggest that you're a high-risk employee, high-risk candidate. Okay, so your job is you have a very adversarial relationship. Okay, they want you to give the dirt on yourself. You want to hide the dirt on yourself. You have opposite incentives. Same with the salary question. You want them to pay as much as they can possibly pay for you. Okay, that's your incentive, to get as much as you can. And they have the opposite incentive. They're trying to get you for as cheap as they could possibly get you. Right? So you have opposite incentives. So they're your opponent. So it's not the time to work with them. It's the time to work against them. Right? So this is the reality of your relationship to the interviewer, whether they're a recruiter or a hiring manager. In a lot of ways, you guys are partners and you're on the same side and you both want to succeed together. In some other senses, you're opponents. Like when you're negotiating salary, you're not on the same side. You both want opposite things. Okay, so returning to this, okay, you don't want to disclose any kind of weakness in a job interview. It's not to your benefit. The more honest you are about like your weaknesses, the more likely they're going to eliminate you, right? So this is not something, and a lot of recruiters, look, obviously, I've got some skin in the game here, but a lot of recruiters, they like to advise you just to like work with them on everything. So when they're trying to eliminate you and get your weaknesses, they say, oh, just be honest. Just tell us everything. Everything that we ask you, just give a full and complete answer and it will all go well. Wrong. They'll use it against you. Okay? So don't disclose any weaknesses whatsoever. Even when they ask you, what are your weaknesses? You don't disclose anything that's damaging. Overconfidence or arrogance. I agree. It's such a fine line between feeling confident and feeling like, yeah, I am absolutely comfortable in this role and I know I can do a great job. And I honestly feel that, I'm really a really good candidate here and that you should select me. It's such a fine line between showing confidence and flipping over into showing arrogance, right? It's something that, once again, younger people, less experienced people, you may make mistakes feeling where that line is, or that border. It's like kind of a fuzzy kind of border where, confidence flips over into arrogance. Older, more experienced people, you may have an advantage. You may have gotten it wrong several times and you've learned from those experiences. Okay, I can say this, but don't say that, right? That's going too far, right? So just be aware of that. Confidence is good. Make sure it can't be construed as arrogance. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. I think that's a good coverage of, what not to say in a job interview. Let me know what your thoughts are on this. Let's go over to questions. Okay, I see there's been some activity in the chat. Get in the chat. Let me know what's up with you, what your reaction is, what questions you might have, what you're struggling with, and I will try to help out. Auntie K says, how would you answer the follow-up? Follow-up on giving notice question they ask. Do you have any projects that you would like to see through before jumping jobs? Okay, where did I leave off here? Okay, here we go. I think this is where it starts. Following up on the giving notice question, they often ask, do you have any projects that you would like to see through before jumping jobs after I've answered with my contractual number of weeks? Once again, it's none of their business. What you're doing with some other employer, even your current employer, they're not entitled to that. So now they're asking for details of what you're working on with somebody else. That's none of their business. So I would just say no. No, there's nothing urgent that I'm doing that, I would need to finish up. So no. Even if that's not true, I wouldn't say, I would still answer the same way. Okay. So that would be my answer to that. Okay. Because once again, they're trying to find red flags. They're trying to find reasons for not hiring you, not offering you the job. So if they say, like you could translate this question as to say, is there any reason why we might not want to offer you this job? That would be like a translation of this question, really. Now, if you said, oh, well, I'm currently working on this big project with my current employer. And, if I don't finish it with them, that would be bad. So I'd have to finish that first before I took any other job like this one. It's like, they're like, okay, well, thank you very much for being honest. And they don't offer you the job, right? So the correct answer to this is no, there's nothing barring, you hiring me. Mike Goretz says, in this job market, what is the average time to land an opportunity? 6 months, used to be 3 months. I don't know. What are we talking about? Are we talking about like a worker level blue collar thing? Are we talking about like a CEO job? What are we talking? I don't know what it is across the economy. And first of all, it depends what country you're in. If you're asking about a specific country. And I don't care. It doesn't matter because the average amount doesn't matter. What matters is what's reasonable for you in your specific situation. That's the only thing that matters. The average of the entire company or the entire world could be 2 weeks. But if you're going for something very exotic, very specific, and very high paid job that has a lot of competition, maybe the average there is 1 year. In which case, that's the only thing that's relevant to you and your expectations, right? So that's something you could look up quite simply on Google or something. But once again, it doesn't matter. Unless you happen to be a 100% average person in every possible way, which I don't think is good. Daryl says, hey there, I just came here to say you're a great person, love your channel. Really had motivated me in my career. Hunt, you're the best. Well, thank you very much, Daryl. It's very kind of you to say. I appreciate that. I think everybody that's spoken up in the chat, you guys are all awesome, especially Mike Goritz, who I kind of gave you a bit more of a harsher answer than I probably should have. You're still asking some intelligent questions, so it's all good. Thank you to Daryl for that high praise. And Mike chooses to associate himself fully with Daryl's comments. So Mike's stock just went up in my book too. So thank you very much. Zachary says, hi, Bill. Love your channel. I've gained so much confidence interviewing thanks to you. Had one on Monday and felt so prepared after watching your videos. Well, thank you also, Zachary. Wow, this is a great day for me. You guys are saying such nice things, so thank you very much. And I'm glad that it's helping. I mean, it's so stupid. Isn't it stupid that, like, how you do in a job interview is kind of less dependent on how qualified you are and more dependent on how much you've learned about preparing for interviews? Isn't that stupid? That shows you how flawed this process is. If this process was actually semi-effective, it would depend more on your actual, level of qualification for the role and not on how many videos of how to do a job interview of mine you've watched, right? It's a signal of how silly this is and how ineffective it is. Amazed says, great advice. Stating a real weakness will most likely work against you. Yes, it will. You've got two candidates, right? They ask the question, what is your weakness, to both candidates. Candidate A says, oh, well, although I'm great at this, I have to admit I'm a bit weak in this area. It's caused some problems in the past for me, but I'm working on it. And candidate B says, oh, no real weaknesses come to mind. I don't feel like I have any major weaknesses that have ever impacted my job performance. It's all good. I can handle anything that people seem to throw at me. So, now which one would you hire? Maybe candidate B was lying outright. Maybe they got a whole string of weaknesses that would turn out to be major issues, right? Maybe they can't see that they have these weaknesses, right? So it's not like they're lying outright. They just, they don't realize that about themselves, right? But they're going to hire candidate B. Maybe candidate A was, in fact, the more suitable person for the job. They would have worked out better, right? So you're absolutely right, Amaze. That's the reality of this. Now, to me, it seems to go against the narrative that a lot of people will sell you. Because when you ask a lot of recruiters, how should I answer the weakness question? They'll say, well, just be honest, give a weakness, and then just say how you're working on it. And it's like, no, that's not the best thing. Because you've just handed them on a plate a reason not to select you. And your competitors, the other candidates, if they haven't done this, then you lose, right? That's the reality. So you're absolutely correct. Auntie K says, how would you answer the common interview question, describe what a good boss looks like to you? How about a bad one? Yeah, these are these BS kind of new age modern questions. Well, I would say a good boss is a good communicator. They are an inspiring leader, and, they behave in a fair and equitable manner. There you go. Is that safe enough? How about a bad one? I would just presumably, conversely, someone who I imagine doesn't do those things. There you go. Nice and safe, right? See, what they're doing again is it's a poorly disguised version of asking the question, what did you dislike most about your previous bosses, right? That's what they're trying to veil here. And so they don't ask you about a previous boss. They ask you about bosses in general, right? You see what and then they pat themselves on the back thinking that they're so clever, in outmaneuvering, people in this sort of tug of war, this sort of cat and mouse kind of game they got going on, this dog and pony show, right? You don't fall in the trap. Remember, you don't say anything negative, right? You list a bunch of great things that are pretty standard. They're not exotic. They're not things that like some bosses do, but maybe others don't, and that's okay. No, they're like stuff that everyone has to do. Have decent communication, be somewhat inspiring, and be fair, right? I don't think anyone would give you an argument that all bosses should have those things, right? And you'd say, well, conversely, it would be someone who I suppose doesn't have those, right? You're not disclosing anything bad there. Mondo Tazo says, when changing careers via technical certifications and internship, how do you use your work experience from a completely unrelated field, going from horticulture to Linux systems administration? Okay, what you need to do, Mondo Tazo, is start shortening your sentences, because the longer your sentences get, the more the grammar has to be absolutely perfect for someone to parse them correctly. Okay? Now what I have to do is I have to go and reread that sentence because there's a lot of information in it. When changing careers via technical certifications and internship, how do you use work experience from a completely unrelated field, going from horticulture to Linux systems administration? I don't know. I don't know what the context is. I don't know what your history is. I don't know what you're going for specifically. So the only answer I could give you would be an extremely general answer that would be like an empty platitude. It wouldn't be helpful. Okay? If you are changing careers, by definition, it means that you don't have experience in the role that you're going to. And therefore, if you're going through a recruiter, it's pretty much almost impossible to change careers by going through a recruiter, because recruiters use as their number one metric, rightly or wrongly, they use the metric of years of experience. How many years of experience do you have doing this? That's the first question that they'll ask you. And if you say, well, 0, because I'm changing careers, then their response, the way they've been trained, is that, well, if you have 0 experience doing it, how could you, like, why do you feel you're qualified to do this? You've never done it before, Why would you be a suitable candidate to do it if you've never done it before, right? That's how they think. It's stupid, but that's how they think. So the way people change careers is they don't go through recruiters. They go through hiring managers, and usually it's not for a formal job. Usually it's through networking. And that's where you demonstrate, like, look, I've never done this kind of thing before. I'm changing careers. But as you can see, I'm awesome to deal with. I'm a great communicator. I'm professional. I've got a lot of technical experience that shows that I'm, highly capable. I've done things that show that I'm highly trainable. And I've given you maybe stories or some kind of backup to show that I'm passionate about doing this kind of work, right? And if you can do that successfully, the hiring manager may say, okay, I'll give you a chance. I'm not convinced that you can do it, but I think there's a good chance that you might be able to do it, so I will give you the chance, the opportunity, right? That's usually how people end up changing careers. Okay. Horticulture and Linux systems administration, aren't those about as far as you can get? I would say like mortuary management and bricklaying, would be closer, or, sort of a curator of a museum of entomology and, the social dynamics of pair bonding relationships in sub-Saharan African tribes, would be sort of equally related to each other. Amaze says, this may be off topic, but please pardon me. Would you recommend showcasing, for example, a financial model that I developed during a virtual interview? Well, that depends on the context. It can be a good thing, okay, depending on, what the situation is, or it can be inappropriate and not necessary in a lot of others, right? If it's a screening interview, it's like a virtual interview as a screening interview, it would probably not be necessary, okay? Probably. Unless, perhaps, the role itself, the only way that would be appropriate in a screening interview would be if you're going for a job where you have to create financial models. Like that's the role. And you could say, well, I do have experience. Normally that would be sufficient, is to say, I've done that before by working for these other people, right? That's what all you have to say. But maybe you can't say that, because maybe you've never worked in a job where that was your role. So you could say, like, I went outside of my role and did this extra work where I created financial models and was commended on it and was rewarded and promoted for it. And as you can see, here's one of my financial models. I'd like to think it's certainly, it puts to bed any concerns that I wouldn't be able to create financial models. Something like that. That's the only time I could see that being appropriate or necessary in a screening interview. Okay. Now, I don't even know if this is a screening interview. It's a virtual interview. If you're talking all about financial models, maybe it is, but the general rule is that shouldn't be necessary. So most of the time that won't be necessary. So without knowing the details, I would say it's probably a no. But it could be a yes depending on if it's in certain situations. I know that's probably super unhelpful, but there it is. Anuj Singh says, hi, Bill. I just wanted to say I love your videos. They help me a lot in my interviews. Thank you very much. That's very nice of you, Anuj. Thank you for the feedback, and I'm glad that they're helping. And thank you for telling me. Anti-K says, great answers. Thanks. Great. I'm glad you're happy. David 007 says, I like 007. I like James Bond. It's like, the man who can kill someone. Like, he can register his hands as weapons, right? But yet, looks perfect in a tux, but yet is a sharpshooter, but yet also knows, like, he's a polymath. He knows about, like, every subject, including the Latin names of rare types of lotus that you get in the upper Amazon, totally realistic, right? It's like basically the male fantasy. Everybody would love to be like that. And as you guys know, I mean, I've achieved it, but it's hard for other people, and we have to make allowances. So David says, how about recruiter asks the former employee, then wouldn't they get the exact reason from the previous employer? Maybe the recruiter knows the previous employer. Yeah, you never know. Maybe it's all a big conspiracy to bring you down. I'm not sure. So what you're saying, if I understand this kind of way creative way you're phrasing it, is if they ask you a question about your previous employer, maybe like why you were let go or something, why did you leave your last employer? And you give an answer, and you're worried that these people are going to call up your current employer and say, we're interviewing with this employee of yours, or this former employee of yours. How did it end? Why did they leave? And the other employer is going to say, oh, well, I'm glad you asked. Here is the full, complete truth of what happened with how they left. Okay, here's the problem. First of all, the only way that they would be able to contact your, say, previous boss is if you disclosed all that information. So either you gave them as a reference, or you provided this detailed information in some way to them, okay? So number one, don't, okay? It's just a bad idea. to give them that information. If you don't want them calling up your previous employer, don't give them the information on your previous employer. Like this was my boss and this is their phone number. And, then if they ask you for permission to contact a previous employer, say no. And if you don't need to give a reason for that, just so you know. But if you feel like you should, a good reason is to say, well, I feel that these people have some strange hangups, and I feel that, they were really upset when I told them I was going to leave, and I feel that they kind of overreacted. And so I'd suspect that they'd they have the incentive to say some bad things about me out of spite. I'm not sure what's going on with that, but so just in case that's a real thing, if I read them correctly, I don't give you permission to talk to them, right? Usually they have to ask that because if you're currently employed there, right? Like if you haven't left yet, right? You're still currently employed as you're looking for jobs. If someone you're talking to, like a recruiter, calls up your current boss and says, like, I'm interviewing your employee for a job, that can have negative effects for you, right? That could even get you fired. The boss says, like, oh, I understand you're looking for another job. Okay, well, you're terminated, right? It has been known, okay? So for that reason, usually, at least certainly all the good employers, they ask you for permission to contact your last boss or your current boss. Okay. So if they do that, say no. And a great reason would be like, well, I'm currently working there and, I don't want you to jeopardize my job. I don't want them to find out that I'm thinking of leaving. Or if I just left, like I said, you would say something along the lines of, well, they're upset that I left. They're upset over having to find like a replacement for me. And so because of that, I suspect there's a chance they might say some bad things about me because of that. So no, I don't give you permission to contact them. The other thing is that if this thing that you suspect did play out and the current recruiter calls your previous boss and says, give me the dirt on this employee, what happened? First of all, a lot of bosses, a lot of companies will not disclose that information. It's just a bad idea. Okay, depending where you are in the world, you could maybe get sued, depending on how it turns out. But also, if they then do decide to disclose some stuff, how does the current recruiter know that that's accurate? Right? They could be lying. They could be trying to sabotage you. That happens a lot too. They don't want you going to a competitor, or something. So they'll sabotage you by saying, oh yeah, we found them drinking on the job, like they'll make up a bunch of stuff, right? And recruiters are aware of that too. So yes, you are technically right. If all the planets line up in a row, there's a chance that they might be able to get, verify this, but it's very highly unlikely that they can do this. Okay, so I wouldn't worry about it. I would just make sure you don't make it easy for them. Don't say, yeah, call my previous boss. Here's their reference. Here's the person to talk to, right? I worked there up until this date. So if you talk to them and ask, don't make it easy for them. Don't disclose this stuff. Use different people as references, to avoid this. Alexander K says, sorry if already asked, but what's the best answer to the question in the title of this translation? Why did you leave your last job? Yeah, well, I already covered that. Also, do you think company reorganization is a good answer? Go back, just rewind this video. Go back to where I answered that. I spent like 10 minutes on it, so I'm not gonna rehash that. Amaze says, hi, Bill. Yes, this is a finance-based role with the hiring manager. Okay. As I said, it could go both ways. It shouldn't be necessary in like a screening call. It shouldn't be necessary until you're talking to a hiring manager. First of all, recruiters don't understand financial models. they are trained in HR. They are not trained in finance or accounting or anything that would equip them to understand a financial model. Okay, so you show it to a recruiter, like, does their eyes glaze over? It's like a page full of numbers. I don't know what that is, right? They never seen anything like that before in their life, right? So they won't know what they're looking at. It won't count in your favor. They can't tell if that's good or bad or a bunch of gibberish, right? The only people that may be able to see the value in it would be a hiring manager. So the hiring manager is the person that's trained in finance, if they're hiring you for a finance-based role where you report to them, right? Okay, so the only person you'd show it to is the hiring manager, and it would only be under specific circumstances. If they've gone beyond the basics, they've looked for obvious reasons to eliminate you. You've passed all the screening stuff, all the salary questions and what is your weakness questions and all that, and they've narrowed it down to maybe the final 3 candidates. All these candidates, they're vetted, they're clean, they could all do the job, we all like them, right? But I got to pick between them. What would really put it over the edge? Maybe you're the only one that showed them some financial models you've built on your own or something, which are not tied to your previous job. If it's tied to your previous job and you did it at work, it would be weird for you to bring that and show it to them in an interview, because this is like work you did for someone else. They paid you for it, and here you are showing it. Oh, excuse me. You're showing it to maybe a potential competitor or something. That would be weird. But if you worked on it at home or outside of your job, and you're very proud of it, it really shows like certain skills or a passion for a certain type of work, that could put it over the edge if it's in that very specific situation. Anti-K says, what would you answer if the hiring manager says during the interview that I don't think our position offers you as much as your current job does? Okay, well, you can basically tell them bullshit. Or else, are you that stupid that you brought me in anyway? Obviously, I'm joking. That's actually what you would want to say. But obviously, you can't for reasons of diplomacy and etiquette. You can't say that. But it's a smokescreen. Any question and any comment that they make saying like, well, I don't think you're qualified. Or, well, I don't think this job is a good fit for you. It's like, well, okay. If that's true, then what you're saying is that the decision's already made. I'm not being hired. That's certainly one of the implications of it. It's also saying that, well, it's an uphill battle to now convince you, because if you honestly think this, and the decision isn't made, it's going to be a real challenge for me to dispel you of that. You could be laboring under a misapprehension that, like I'm not good at something when I'm actually good at something, but you think I'm not, So you're telling me, I think you're not good at this. It's like, okay. They used to do things called stress interviews. I'm given to understand recently that people don't do those as much. Maybe they still do it in management circles. I don't know. But stress interviews were this thing where they intentionally try and get you riled up. And they do that by saying stuff like this to you. They say like, well, I don't think you're good at this. Right? Which is silly, because if they honestly thought that, then the obvious question is, well, why did you bring me in for an interview if you don't think I'm good at this? This is kind of important for the job. So it shows that it's a lie, right? It's like somebody saying, okay, apply for this job. Now, if we get 1,000 applications, we're going to look at these applications and we're going to ask the top 5 candidates to come in for an interview, right? So you are selected as one of the top 5, so you get an interview. You go down to the interview and they say, well, we don't think you're qualified, right? I mean, how would you interpret that? Well, I'd interpret it as a lie. Like if you honestly feel I'm not qualified, what possessed you to bring me down here? Are you high? It's like, or maybe you're just that stupid. I'm not sure. I'm not sure which. I don't know which one's worse. But the reason, like, you would probably conclude that it's not genuine. We don't actually think that you're qualified. So it's a strategic question to see how you're going to react to that, right? And they would do that all the time in stress interviews. They'd have like a panel of people doing this kind of thing to you in a stress interview. There wouldn't be one, there'd be like 4, because that makes it even more uncomfortable, right? And I've been in some interviews where you get some ball-busting person that, just says these highly provocative things. They disparage like all your accomplishments and all your education and all this, and it's some tactic just to see. First of all, we want to see how you behave under these conditions, because this job might be stressful, or it requires you to be diplomatic and represent the organization well under all conditions. And if you start getting upset, noticeably upset in an interview, then you're probably not the person that can do that, right? So first of all, number one, I would not show any signs of frustration, even though it's probably aggravating. I wouldn't take them to task over it. Now, in theory, I would lie to you if I said that like I can give someone the perfect response under all conditions. I can't. But I know people who can. And the theory goes like this. If they say something like that, the first thing you do is you agree with them. Okay, and that diffuses it, right? So the hiring manager says, I don't think our position offers you as much variety as your current job does. And you say, yeah, it certainly looks that way, right? I agree with you. It certainly looks that way. I'm used to doing a wide variety of things, And then you then explain why that's not a problem and it's actually a good thing, okay? So you would say something like, well, I agree with you. It does look like, this is kind of a very focused job. There's only a handful of duties involved in this job that I've seen so far. And have done quite a variety of different things in my past. But, I actually like that. I think that, the fact that it's focused, the fact that it doesn't try to do everything at once, I think there are certain advantages in that. And I think those play to my strengths, So that's one of the appealing things about it for me, actually. And that's why I applied for the job. And I'm excited to see how far this goes. Something like that. I think that would be the template for a good response to that. Whenever somebody like says something blatantly false, or like that you suspect is they're just trying to get a rise out of you, you always answer by agreeing. Even if it's to say like, you're absolutely right. I do see how you might have gotten that impression from this conversation. Something like that, right? Anybody would have concluded that based on our previous conversation. Unfortunately, we haven't had an opportunity so far to explore all the work I've done in this area. And if we had, I'm sure you would conclude quite the opposite, that that's not the case. And I'd actually be able to perform very well in this area, right? Hopefully we'll get a chance to explore some of that together, and then you'll see how it's not going to be an issue. Something like that. That's the template for how to answer these types of questions. I would be lying to say that I've always remembered that in the moment. I haven't. I have in my memories several incidents where I did not do that, and to my disadvantage. It was just not the right thing to say, not the very diplomatic thing to say. But that's what a good answer would look like. Something like that. Mustafa says, keeping a job is really... What? Keeping a job is really boring. I can't be when it's time to start your own contractor business. Okay, well, best of luck to you. Any advice on obtaining investment methods such as banks or cash loans? Why would... okay. Yeah, but the most important question, Mustafa, is, do you have any fashion tips for me? That's what I'm hoping. I was really hoping you'd be able to give me some fashion tips. That's why we're here, right? No, I'm not giving tips on bank loans. You could probably see that from the title of this live stream. Listen, I do a live stream on Mondays called Side Hustle Ideas, and where I talk about entrepreneurship. I don't want to get into that kind of stuff right here. We're talking about jobs and interviews, so. But maybe watch some of my videos. I've got an entire channel dedicated to, business advice for starting companies, being successful in business, making sales, doing things properly, and succeeding. And a component of that is the financial side, okay? If you're starting a company, all I'm going to say here is that get your head out of thinking about loans and money. Okay, you don't need money, certainly, to start a contractor business. If you have some tools, how much does it cost to rent a few tools? All you have to spend is that on your first day, and then you're doing work, right? So don't worry about loans. Focus on sales, and you will do well. Amazed says, thank you very much for answering my question. That was helpful. Well, you're absolutely welcome, Amazed. It was an intelligent question. Unconventional advice that works says, like your template, answer by agreeing and then proceeding. Yeah, like our tendency is to say, no, you're wrong, right? Now, humans don't like being told that they're wrong. You don't like being told that you're wrong. I don't like being told that I'm wrong, okay? It's a universal failing of human nature that even when we're wrong, I mean, when we're completely out to lunch, we don't like being told that we're wrong, right? And we get upset, when, so I might be trying to turn lead into gold using Tide Pods, a bucket, and my trusty shredder, which is over here. I don't know if you guys can see that. Yeah. Okay. And I'm damn sure that I'm on the right track and this is a worthwhile pursuit. And then somebody comes and tells me, Bill, listen, I think you're an awesome guy, but I don't think you're going to succeed. You really should maybe abandon that idea and focus on something that you're better at. And I hear that, being a typical human being, I hear that and I go, so you're my enemy too, right? Okay. Oh, okay. Now that I know, I can see what's going on here. Now, there are ways of dealing with this kind of thing, right? So that's my response as a human. We don't like being told that we're wrong, even when we're wrong, okay? So if someone says something provocative to you in an interview, they say, I don't think you're qualified, or, you keep talking about, how you have this experience and that it's good. I don't think it's really that useful, right? They'll say something like that, something retardedly insensitive or just plain out to lunch. And either they're serious, in which case, I don't see the interview going anywhere great after that, or more likely, they're saying it as some kind of subtle challenge for you to then talk about that and talk about how it is, in fact, valuable and it's not, a waste of time, right? Maybe they don't have a lot of communication skills and they don't realize how annoying and offensive their comments actually are, or their questions actually are. And our reaction to this is to get upset, right? Are you challenging, my ability to do this job? It's like, hello, I've just showed you on my resume, I've got 15 years experience doing this, and you're sitting there telling me that I don't know how to do it? I mean, do you want me to come through over the table and we can resolve this in another manner? So it makes the blood boil. It angries up the blood when you hear these kind of things. And the correct way of diffusing the situation is not to challenge them and tell them you're wrong, because then they will get upset. It's to agree and say, you're absolutely right. I totally understand how you could think that, and you're right. We haven't really explored, the nature of how this adds value, and certainly in a way that's maybe relevant to the job you're looking for, or something like that, and you go from there, right? It takes training to be able to do this. Anyone who's ever given a press conference, which I've I haven't, and I've avoided it because you get these provoking kind of questions. But anybody who's in public relations, if you've worked in public relations, this is what it's all about. It's about understanding how to diffuse issues and diffuse awkward conversations, as opposed to doing what it seems like most of the world does on social media, where you just escalate when in doubt, escalate. Let's take this to the next level. Let's make it personal, right? Let's bring their mother into this, and stuff like that. That's kind of like the default sort of thing that we do now. Where are we here? Shuby? Is that how you say that? I thought that was like Scooby, as in like Scooby-Doo. Why do HR ask, where do you see yourself in 5 years? That's some good lingo. It's like the cliched lingo from some cartoons from about like 50 years ago. What do he say? Why do they ask the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? This is a question about the future. And they don't always phrase it like that. Sometimes they can phrase it as, what are your ambitions, right? They can phrase it as, do you see yourself doing this type of thing in the future? Or, any question about the future. The reason they're asking is because they want, it's this very subtle or pseudo-subtle way of trying to uncover your motivations, what you're really into. Okay? The correct answer is always, I see myself right here. This is what I want to do. This is my definition of the perfect job at the perfect place. And you guys that are interviewing me, you are my definition of the perfect people to work for, right? That's the correct answer. If you say, I would rather be somewhere else, they interpret that as a red flag. They assume, okay, so this is not what you're really passionate about. Okay, great. Now that we know that, I've got good news for you. You're not getting the job, right? So that should tie in with your ambitions perfectly, right? So that's why they ask the question. They're trying to, it's like this subtle way of you revealing what what your ambition really is. And if you say anything other than this company or this job, it can count against you. Some companies, they like for you to want to be ambitious and get promoted. Other companies, they want you to stay in the role until you die. Okay, they don't want you to be ambitious and want to move up. They want you to, we hired you for this role. We want you in that role. We don't want you, wanting to be somewhere else or moving up, right? So you don't know what they're looking for. Are they the company that likes you to be ambitious, or the company that doesn't like you to be ambitious? You don't know. So a safe answer is to basically say this job, maybe moving up if that's appropriate. And, if that's what you guys do. Okay, that's why they ask it. Anti-K says, if the hiring manager says that the position pays between X and Y is less than I would be willing to work for, should I abandon that process or continue and hope that I can negotiate a pay above the range if they present me an offer? That opens a whole can of worms. That opens the salary negotiation thing. Hopefully you were around at the beginning of this stream where I talked about the fact that you have a complex relationship with recruiters. In some ways, they're your partner. In some other ways, they're your adversary. Okay, and when we talk about compensation, they are your adversary. They want to get you for cheap. The cheaper they can get you for, the happier they are. The more they will look good to their bosses. And, you know what I mean? That's what their incentive is. You, on the other hand, have the opposite incentive. You want to get everything you possibly can from these people. Like, if they can pay you more, you want them to pay you more. Even if you feel that, like, well, for whatever reason, you feel that you're only worth, say, 50, but these people will pay up to 75 in the role, then damn it, you want 75, right? So that's the nature of what's going on here. So now you're no longer buddy-buddy with these people, working with them. You're now working against them because they're working against you, right? That's the nature of this. It's like a buyer-seller type thing. You have opposite incentives, okay? Now, another fact you got to throw into the mix is that anything they say in an interview when it comes to salary ranges and what their reservation price is, like, how high they'd be willing to go, it's usually a lie. You can almost just assume it's all lies, right? It's what they want you to know. It's what they want you to think. Oh, we can only go this high. We can't go higher than that. Yeah, they want you to think that, right? The reality is they can go this high, but they're not going to tell you that. Do you go to a store and say, like, I don't know, this can of baked beans that I want to buy because I'm into beans, right? I would be willing to pay as much as this. I see that you're charging $2, really, I'd have paid up to $10 for that. I just think that you should know that. Do you say stuff like that? If they could turn around and say, okay, well, in that case, it's $10. I've just changed the price to $10. By the way, nobody else in this town sells cans of baked beans. So if you want one, you gotta buy this one. And the price has just gone up to $10, right? Do you disclose that kind of information? No, you don't. It's not to your advantage, right? What you do instead is you go to the owner of the store and you say, okay, you see this can of baked beans? You want $2? I don't know. That's kind of, I'd like to buy it, but I only have $1. Sorry. I mean, I don't suppose you could let it go for $1. New customer here, maybe, would persuade me to stay in the store, and they'll say, okay, fine, here, it's $1, right? You do the opposite. You don't disclose, you don't show them your hand, what your cards in your hand. That's a poker reference, right? So that's what they're doing to you. If in a job interview they say, this is the range for the role, chances are it's a lie. If they got a perfect candidate that they were absolutely in love with, you really think they couldn't go any higher than that? They couldn't push it any higher? They could go to their boss and say, like, we'd like to pay them this. Is that okay? Can we just pay them more money and then we get them and this is over? It's usually a lie. Okay, so throw that into the mix. They want you to believe that A, you are getting the top of the range. No matter what they're paying you, they want you to believe that you got the very top of the range. That way, you feel like, these people believe in me. They paid me the most anyone could possibly pay me to be in this role. Therefore, they must really value me. So I feel loyal to them and I'm going to give back, right? And I'm happy to be here. I feel thankful. Really, they've paid you the bottom of the range, but they want you to believe that you're being paid the top of the range, right? So anything they say in a job interview usually is a cheap tactic to get you to believe something, right? The only way that you wouldn't believe this is if you actually knew a bit about what's going on and you did some research, right? Okay. So I'm not going to get into this anymore here. The salary negotiation is a big topic. There's a lot more to it. I can't just answer it in like 2 minutes. But we should definitely talk about this. You know what? I'm doing a live stream in 15 minutes called Honest HR Nitrous. We could get into that there if you want to stay on the line, NTK. But unfortunately, I have to wrap this up. Thank you to the people who participated. You guys are awesome. If you are wanting to get hired, but it's not going very well, the process is very long and you don't feel very confident in what you're doing, you really want to understand what to do and how everything works, get that course. Okay. That will help you. That's where I put basically all my advice all in one place. And it's not just one method of getting a job. It also is like, it gives you other methods, including a method that's networking based, but it's for introverts. So it's all pretty much done online, and I can open up, you could discover a whole, cornucopia of good jobs that are actually out there that are not publicly posted, and you could put yourself forward for them. Okay, so if you're interested in that kind of stuff, get that course. There's a link to it in the description box below the video feed here. And I've done videos that are like FAQs about that course, so you know exactly how it works and what you're getting, and so it's very transparent. Okay, so check that out. I will be back in about 15 minutes with another live stream. I do this live stream weekly, How to Get Hired. So I will be back same time next week with another episode of How to Get Hired. You guys are awesome. I wish you nothing but the best. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you soon. See ya.